Hello and welcome to the channel. I will tell you interesting scary stories from Reddit and not only. Do not forget to support the author of the story. I will leave his credits in the description. I also hope for your support of my channel in the form of likes and comments. I really appreciate it. Get comfortable in your bed, put on your headphones, and turn off the lights. It's going to be a night of nightmares. We're starting. Another haul of garbage. Kimber is looking out the window, her mouth a deep line across her face, scowling. Warm, yellow light kisses the shadows, our floodlight activated by sudden movement. By him. I refuse to look up from my book. Doing so will just encourage her. Kimber's eyes remain fixated, reminding me of a predator tracking their prey. With one graceful swoop, she swings her body around. He gives me the fucking creeps. She is deliberate in her movements and sweeps over to her side of the bed, sliding atop the pressed sheets. The pair of silk shorts that I bought her for Valentine's Day ride up. They're peppered with cartoon candied hearts with banal sayings. One sits perfectly on her ass, be mine. I touch the back of her milky thigh pocked with goosebumps. She swats my hand away. You're not saying anything. I let us a sigh, knowing I had blithely crossed some invisible line with my silence. What is there to say? Mr. Corinne is an old man. A hoarder, yes, but he's harmless. I put my book down, this time trying for Kimber's pudgy exposed midsection, only to be met with fingers that flick me away. There's something about Kimber when she's mad. She has a sultry look, pouty lips, wild eyes. It drives me nuts. It makes me feel like I did in middle school. The first time I saw Pamela Anderson spread eagle out on my dad's Playboy. That perfect triangle of blonde hair coming to fruition at her center. Fuck. She bolts up, agitated. He's driving down our property values. How is that harmless? I know this rant. I hear it often. Our neighbor, Mr. Korean's compulsive hoarding has become an obsession for Kimber. There is literally a landfill in his backyard, Dan. A mountain of trash. I saw a rat scurry across the street the other day in front of his house. A fucking rat. She flops back down. I just don't understand how you can be so nonchalant. What do you want me to do? I laugh, trying to make light of things, shrug my shoulders. Mr. Miller told me his wife ran off on him years ago. No family, no kids. There's no need to make him feel even worse by being rude or mean. I need Kimber to cool off now. It's not good for her. Or the baby. I check my watch, trying to distract her. Alright, time for bed. Next time I book a flight out before 6 a.m., yell at me, okay? I turn, trying to kiss her, but my lips are met by a mouthful of stringy hair. I just wish sometimes you would have my back, Dan. Be a man, you know. I swallow hard. The words are shrapnel, but I do my best to shake it off, like water off a duck's back. Kimber rolls to her side, facing the opposite wall. What time will you be back tomorrow? I'm guessing around 4 in the afternoon, assuming there are no delays. The meeting is right at 9, so I should be able to get on the 1 p.m. out of LAX. I'm trying to break the awkwardness. Cross fingers! My voice is high-pitched, squeaky. Brian and Kelly are coming over tomorrow night for dinner, so hopefully you aren't late. Kimber's tone has an edge of iciness to it. Oh, I'm such a numbskull. I completely forgot. I slap my palm against the side of my head, hoping she saw. She didn't. I'll do my best to be on time, my lady. Oh, by the way, I think it's just Brian. He and Kelly ended things from last I heard. He's been my best friend since college. I continue to the silent room. But man, he sure got a revolving door of ladies. None of them seem to last very long. Poor guy hasn't found what we have yet. Sure, Kimber says, her voice faint. I reach out my hand to touch her shoulder, instead withdrawing it. I slip out of the bedroom the next morning, tiptoeing out of the room as not to wake Kimber. When I leave the house, I see our neighbor Fred Millard in the front yard, contorted into some strange pose on his yoga mat. He's a widower, the kind of guy that wears linens and chunky crystals around his neck. A crown of wispy white hair peeks out as he rolls his neck to look at me. Hey Dan, I saw a raccoon wander into your yard last night. Pretty big fella too. Mr. Millard smiles. It's just our 3 houses on the small street, in a neighborhood devoid of crime. Yet Mr. Millard has taken it upon himself to be the neighborhood watch. He even set up a sizable security camera a few months ago that points directly onto the road. Cool, thanks for letting me know. I nod my head, and he bends his arm out from God knows where, waving me goodbye. I make it to the airport. Just as the gate is about to close for my flight, I hear that dreaded crackle over the intercom. Anxious looks amongst the flight attendants. Sorry, folks, but it looks like we have a mechanical issue. 2 hours later, and still on the tarmac, we disembarked. The flight finally canceled. Are there any other flights going to LA today? I ask a wiry man with a hint of a mustache behind the ticket counter. He shakes his head. We can get you on tomorrow? He looks at me, hopeful. I grab a cab back home, exacerbated and exhausted. As it pulls up to my home, Mr. Corinne, who's standing in his front yard, waves me over. Hey Dan, you got a minute? Mr. Corinne gives me a toothless smile. Sure. I swing my bag over my shoulder, coming over to his browned yard. The rusted metal mailbox in front is overflowing with coupon books and letters. I spot one with final notice written in the large red print. Come around back with me. Mr. Corinne leads the way to his backyard. I hold my breath as the smell hits me. A putrid combination of ripe fruit, mold, rot, and decay, and something else. Something earthy. There in front of me, baking in the hot sun, are piles of garbage. Cavernous and wretched structures. A lifetime of waste. A morbid collection of discarded things. There are paint cans blackened with mold, rows of couches, wet and rotten, towers and towers of soggy papers and boxes that have been abused by time. With our movement, I see a flock of brown bugs, maybe cockroaches, that scatter away, retreating to some dark, undisturbed recess. Maybe Kimber was right. This place is damned. From behind his fence, Mr. Corinne is standing still, and I notice he's looking at my front door. I delicately maneuver next to him, stepping on something that disintegrates under my foot, becoming a sludgy mess atop my shoe. What can I help you with, Mr. Corinne? Won't be long now. Mr. Corinne clicks his tongue. Even standing here, I feel like I've been infected by it, itchy, as if it's burrowing under my skin. A few flies have become attracted to whatever it was I stepped on, circling and buzzing. There's a sound, a movement that comes to the corner of my eye. My front door opens, and there is Kimber in the frame. She's wearing only a sports bra, nothing else. Her stomach was slightly swollen, a tuft of red hair underneath it. Got that beaver out. Mr. Corinne pipes up with a low whistle. Repulsed, I feel a flicker of anger, and I'm about to say something, but I see someone else. It's a man that comes in just behind Kimber, wrapping 2 arms around her and kissing her on the cheek. He passes by her, out the door. Turning, his side profile comes into view, the nose, ill-fitting, and too large, like a Groucho Marx mask. It's a face I would recognize anywhere. My good old buddy Brian. My heart drops. Putting his finger to one side of his nose, Mr. Corinne blows out a monstrous yellow bugger that falls to the ground. He swallows, and I can hear the mucus in his words. She's been doing this for months now, whenever you head out of town. Eyes stained with red veins, his chin wobbles. The man parks down the street, same place every time. I was just trying to figure out a time to tell you. It's all about timing, right place, right time. Figured you needed to see for yourself. I feel my legs go, buckling like plastic straws that crumple to the ground. The smell is making my head spin. I feel a tsunami of nausea as hot, acidic bile fills my throat. Tears mask my sight. I gulp it down, a hard swallow that fills my mouth with saliva. Heart palpitations drum unmercilessly inside my head, ears, invading the space and everything else in between. Like driving in heavy rain, my world is blurred. Jesus, you alright, kid? Mr. Corinne's puffy visage comes into my line of vision, and all I can muster is a slight shake of my head. Come on inside. I'll make you some tea. A hand comes underneath my armpit, lifting me from the ground. I am surprised by how strong Mr. Corinne is, realizing that he's steering me inside his house. A screen door slams behind me, and with horror, I realize my surroundings. Black plastic garbage bags rise, stacked to the ceiling. A thin gossamer layer of dust covers every surface like fresh snowfall. The walls that I can see are grayed, spongy, and to my amazement, moving. I take a step forward, inspecting. The swelling gashes are squirming and ripe with life. Thousands, if not millions, of insects marching in terrible unison. I stand still, not wanting to touch anything. A cracked cup is shoved into my hand, the liquid caramel colored. Without thinking, I bring it to my lips. It tastes like sour licorice. My heart slows, settling into sublime calmness, like the last hour has melted away into nothing. What is this? I look to Mr. Corinne, who gives me a reassuring smile. I used to practice natural medicine, herbalism, and all of that. Even spent a few years with traditional Mayan healers down south. That there is a nice little remedy of kava, valerian, and lemon balm. Works better than any of that pharmaceutical crap they have nowadays. There's that toothless smile again. Does the trick right? Bet it knocked you right off your ass, don't it, kid? It sure does. I take another gulp, examining the shelves and center table. It's covered with vials and containers. Doctor, feel good, I murmur. Hell, when I was your age, I used to know how to mix up all sorts of things. I realize Mr. Corinne is chattering away, and I attempt to tune in. People used to come around from all over to see me about things, sleeping potions, anxiety-curing teas, natural Viagra. He gives me a lewd wink as he says the last part. I had a tincture that could paralyze someone as if they were dead, only to have them wake up a few hours later, better than anesthesia. He sniffs. I even had a very successful truth serum made from a mixture of nightshade. The US government bought the patent for it. Truth serum, my voice shakes. It's a rudimentary formula, all natural, perfectly safe. But it breaks down inhibitions so that the recipient feels compelled to tell the truth. Mr. Corinne fiddles about his kitchen, pushing aside a line of ants, marching across the counter. You have any of it still? I feel the words leaving my mouth before the idea is fully formed. A sick plant, flowering without roots. Mr. Corinne laughs. I think so. I would need to check. He gives me an unsteady gaze. What you need it for? More words leave my mouth, a spew of verbal diarrhea about Kimber, a barrage of derogatory insults and swears that I would otherwise find shameful. When it's over, I feel both cleansed and sullied. Cusping my head in my hands, a deep, inhuman wail emerges from my mouth. He's my best friend, and I thought, Kimber was the love of my life. I need to know why they did it. Turning my head, Mr. Corrin stares at me, his brow furrowed. I don't think you'll ever get the answers you want, kid, even with a truth serum. Please, I croak. He nods his head, leaving the room. Sounds of glasses being moved and grunting can be heard. Mr. Corrin emerges a few minutes later with a dark blue glass bottle. He holds it out, an unwanted gift, and I grasp it in my hand. You only need a small dosage for the stuff to work. No more than a tablespoon, all right? I nod my head, moving to the door. I don't bother looking back as I go outside and back towards home. Kimber is surprised to see me when I get back, keenly looking at me as I tell her the flight was canceled. She shrugs her shoulders and goes about her day as if nothing is amiss. I try to smell him on her, even go to the bedroom pressing my nose against the sheets like a desperate bloodhound. There's no trace of the betrayal, no matter how hard I look. My head is swimming, and for the rest of the day, I stare into my computer screen. I type an email of gibberish, only to erase it all, and then do it over again and again. I am not sure if it is the tea Mr. Corrin gave me or my emotional state, but I feel dead inside, nice and numbed up. I am relieved at the cloudiness of my mind. I am not sure I could bear to think right now. I find myself looking at the slight bulge in my pocket, where the vial lives, waiting. I let my fingers rest on it, contemplating what to do when Brian comes tonight, when I see them together. At around 6, the doorbell rings, and there's Brian, all smiles. I have to dig my nails into the palm of my hand to prevent myself from slugging him in the face, instead cupping him on the back and welcoming him inside. Brian has a mouth like a fish, big rubbery lips that kiss Kimber on the lips. Look at you, he says, beaming at her. You've gotten so big since I last saw you. He pats her stomach affectionately. 6 more months till the little nugget comes out, huh? He and Kimber laughed. I realize with horror, maybe what's growing inside her isn't mine. With more resolve than ever, I offer them both drinks, ushering them to the couch in the living room. I'll have a beer, Brian says, his eyes not leaving Kimber. And you, darling? I look to Kimber. Her radiant face turns towards me. It's like a knife in the gut. I'm okay, Dan. Thanks. I'll bring you a juice, I say. And as I leave to go into the kitchen, I see her roll her eyes. Another knife. I set the 3 drinks in front of me. With shaking hands, I slide out the blue vial, holding it out front. I hear laughter from the living room, and with a jolt of panic, I almost drop it. I take a breath, calming my nerves. With a small spoon, I measure out a tablespoon, dropping a dosage into 2 of the drinks. The liquid is clear and dissipates, leaving no trace of my crime. I press all 3 glasses close to my chest, careful to leave my own in my right hand. All right, here we go, I say, and Kimber and Brian look up at me as I pass them their glasses. I take my sitting down. What should we cheer to? To new beginnings, Brian says, raising his glass. I think I see a hardness in his face, which causes a flicker of hatred to burn in my chest. We clink glasses, and I watch gleefully as Kimber and Brian take large swigs. I wonder how long it will take to set in. I grasp my glass and feel my heart pounding. I wait, watching for any subtle movements, a slacked jaw, droopy eyes, anything. Oh, Kimber says flatly. Her eyes rolled into the back of her head as her body goes limp, slumping over. Kimber! I run over to my wife, only to see Brian's cumbersome body keel over, his head hitting our coffee table with a dull, wet thud. I reach for her body. It's unmoving, lifeless. I don't hear her heartbeat or breathing. Without thinking, I run across the street, pounding on the front door. "Mr. Corinne," I yell. "Come around back," I hear a voice say, and sprint to the back of the house, outside where we met earlier. Gasping for air, I run to the back, where I see Mr. Corinne emerging from the house. I gave them the serum, but I don't know what happened. I think they might be dead. Saying the words out loud amplifies the seriousness of the situation. I have to grasp the side of the house to steady myself. "Dead?" Mr. Corinne's face goes white. "How much did you give them?" "Just a tablespoon," I stammer, crying in between my words. "Just like you said. Oh my God, what have I done?" "I said just a teaspoon." Mr. Corinne sounds calm, but I can see a sense of alarm in his eyes. I sink to the ground. "I'll call the police," I say weakly. "I'll say it was an accident." Mr. Corinne shakes his head. "You want to go to jail for the rest of your life?" "What else can I do?" I wail out, slamming my fist down. Mr. Corinne kneels, his face level with mine. "I feel partially responsible for this, so I'm going to help you, Dan." He clears his throat. "You got a wheelbarrow, kid?" I nod my head, wiping tears from my face. Mr. Corinne clears his throat. "Bring the bodies here, and we bury them. Put them deep in the garbage pile where nobody will ever find them." "What?" I feel my head spinning. "There are some deep spots out there. They'll be gone without a trace." He sniffs. "That, or I mean you can go to jail for murdering your wife." "What? What will I say when people ask why they're missing?" I look to Mr. Corinne, mulling over what he's saying. Is there a possible way out of this? A scenario that doesn't involve police arresting me, a publicized trial, and a lifetime of imprisonment? When the police come or people start asking, just say your woman ran off with that fellow, I'll back you up. Say I saw them grab a cab left. Police will have no reason to look over here, and even if they did... Mr. Corinne pauses, surveying his expansive junkyard. It's not like they could even find them. I look at him, my thoughts confused. I don't move. "They fucked you over, Dan. Do you want to go to jail for the rest of your life? For them? After everything they took away from you?" Mr. Corinne licks his lips. I whine. "I mean, tell them that it was a mistake, that I accidentally gave it to them. Still involuntarily manslaughter, even in the best cases. Besides, what jury is going to believe it was an accident?" He gives me a sympathetic look. "Go on, go get them. I can't. It will be better this way. Give you a chance to start over." There's a kindness in Mr. Corinne's eyes, matching his soothing words. "Don't worry, we'll cover them up and pretend it never happened." He reminds me of my mother, who would console me when I would knock over a glass. It's just a little spilled milk. Or in this case, it's just a little double homicide. There now. Mr. Corinne presses a flask to my mouth, and I taste something bitter. Just some liquid courage. Better get a move on now. On my knees, I move in a zombie-like haze back to my house. Our street is quiet, and I'm grateful that Mr. Millard's home is dark, the curtains drawn tight. Thank God for small favors. I carefully go around the back, cutting through the living room with our oversized wheelbarrow. I have to bend down, using all my strength to load in Brian. "You heavy fuck," I wheeze. Next is Kimber. Her body is cold, and I lift her gently from the ground, sliding her next to Brian. My heart is breaking, pain ruptures like shards of glass against my insides. I take one last look at her stilled body, and cover them both with a large blue tarp I found in the shed out back. It's a struggle to manage the wheelbarrow. The handles shift under my hands, and I have to heave and pressing forward with my knees. The distance is short, and I open the gate to Mr. Corinne's maneuvering through the piles of trash and the uneven ground below me. "Over here, Dan," Mr. Corinne calls, and I follow the voice. It's coming from a large mound of garbage near the border, and deep and towards the border of the woods. Weaving through the maze of piles, I see Mr. Corrin standing in a hollowed-out conclave. I dug deep into the earth when I was younger. He beacons me over in an excited tone. Needed to dig deep to have plenty of room for my treasures. He puffs up his chest, and I realize with disgust he's proud of it all. Look here, he points, and squinting I can see a hollowed-out tunnel, a space in between the rubbish that drops into a darkened abyss. Let's just slide him down there. From the wheelbarrow, I grab Brian underneath his shoulders and let him fall to the ground. Mr. Corrin takes his head in between his bony fingers, pushing him head first into the crevasse, forcefully shoving him deeper inside. When Brian's body becomes unyielding, Mr. Corrin stops and bites his lip, his eyes darting in every direction. I see a grin come over his face as he settles on a broken broom a few feet away. He picks it up and probes Brian, continuing to push him down. Like a fucking turd stuck in the toilet, Mr. Corrin grunts. He takes his legs, swinging it back hard, and Biran's body disappears. I can hear a rattling as cans and other items falling behind him, covering him. Finally, Mr. Corrin spits on the ground. I register everything that's happening and look to my beloved wife, still in the wheelbarrow. I can't dispose of Kimber this way, I say finally. Mr. Corrin puts his hands squarely on his hips. Don't worry, Dan, I can manage. He puts his wrinkly hand on my shoulder. You've been through a hell of a day. I'll give your missus a proper burial. Why don't you go home and rest? I think about it. Think about turning myself in, calling the police. Think about crawling down the hole that we just put Brian into. The thoughts race through my brain. I look to Kimber again, and my eyes widen. There's movement, ever so subtle. Her chest rises, barely an inch, and then collapses again. She's breathing. She's alive, I shout with glee, running to her. Oh my God, I'll take her to the hospital right now. I grab the handles of the wheelbarrow, pushing it when it breaks suddenly. Mr. Corrin is standing in front of me, his foot against the wheel. Not so fast, Danny. He gives me a sly smile. Didn't want it to end like this, but I think you'd better get going. What are you talking about, Mr. Corrin? I look at him confused. As far as I see it, you have two options. You can leave right now. Do just what we talked about. Go on about your life. Hell, try again at love. Maybe find a new pretty little wife in a few years. He grins. That or you go to jail, you know, for killing that guy. He motions to the hole we just shoved Brian down. I don't understand. I have a sickening feeling in the pit of my stomach. If you leave with your missus, I can bet you anything that as soon as you do, Mr. Millard, whose camera just so happens to face the street, will call the police, letting them know that his neighbor, you Dan, was acting mighty suspicious, going over across the street with a big wheelbarrow. It won't take long for the cops to put two and two together, a man missing at all. Mr. Corrin lowers his gaze. I might tell them, I saw you come out here to this area of the lawn and make some commotion. But you helped me. It suddenly clicks. They'll know you were involved too. Mr. Corrin shrugs. The camera won't show it. It will be your word against mine, and all the evidence points to you. He sticks two long, spidery fingers in the center of my chest. Or... Mr. Corrin spins around, coming in front of me, and gently taking the handles of the wheelbarrow. You can go home as planned. Forget this ever happened. Say your wife ran off with your best friend. If the cops ever ask, I'll say I saw the two of them drive off into the sunset. Mr. Millard will say the same. Just as we discussed. You planned this? I gasp. Just the right place, at the right time. Go on now, Dan. Scamper home. Mr. Corrin takes the wheelbarrow, maneuvering it, with Kimber away from me in the opposite direction. What are you... I'm struggling with the words. What are you going to do with her? Mr. Corrin brushes Kimber's cheek with the back of his hand, and stepping back, he takes them both deeper inside the trash cave and into the darkness, disappearing from sight and leaving me alone. There's a part of me that wants to run after them. Instead, I retreat, leaving Mr. Corrin's backyard. As I close the gate, I think I hear a faint scream in the distance. I hope I'm imagining it. When I get to my front door, I notice Mr. Millard emerging from his home, sauntering on his way to Mr. Corrin's. He pauses on the street, turning towards me. A lascivious smile darkens his face as he bends his arm and waves before walking away.